mumble. So I try to not mumble as much when I'm in public, but it's a bad habit of mine. My crew will tell you I'm a bad mumbler. Mostly I just talk to the windows, but. All right. So my company specializes in window repair and restoration. You probably are just used to seeing ads everywhere saying if you want to save energy, you have to replace them. It's the best thing. There are all these wonderful incentives and bargains and rebates and thrills that you can get. And you never hear ads from people like me because we tend to be small businesses. I run one of the larger shops in Boston. I have 6 employees. But we're lucky in Boston that we actually do have probably close to a dozen companies that specialize in window restoration. So there's some that specialize in things like Boston City Hall, and they like to do larger projects. There are some who are one-guy shops out of their garage. We're sort of in the middle. We like to do mostly residential projects, but we do have a lot of commercial projects that we have done and are doing. So we kind of straddle the game whenever we want to. But anyway, so we offer an alternative. People often say, my windows are beyond repair, we can't possibly do anything with them, they have to be replaced. And that is one of the things to look at is structural condition. We've had people bring in windows in bags of pieces that we can put back together and put back in. They're usually the pretty ones, the ones that are the round ones, the oval ones, you know, the interesting ones that literally just fall out. So structural condition is one issue. I honestly can say I don't know of a window that we've seen that we can't fix. Sometimes we take a more advantageous way to fix it. We had one that had an entire rail that was rotted. It had been sitting in water for a long time. And we happened to have one that we had salvaged that was exactly the same size, and we put the salvage sash back in instead of trying to fix the old one. Because it was, I mean, it was obviously pretty much the same. So we have some options of what we can do, but I don't know that I've ever had a window that said I could not fix it. The character of windows is usually why people come to us. They like the way their windows look, albeit they probably don't look as good as they would like them to look. But certainly, like I mentioned, the unusual shape ones, trying to get anybody to make anything that's curved and arched these days is next to impossible. It's very expensive, so saving the ones that you have can be very economical. You know, there's a look and a feel to antique windows, and when, I mean, of course I'm obsessed with windows, but when you drive around, you look at a house and you're like, something's not right about that one. It's too small, too big, too white, too plastic, whatever. So, you know, antique windows were usually original to your house, and they do add to the character of it. One thing that, it's been interesting because I started out sort of feeling like we were part of the preservation movement, but it turns out that window restoration falls nicely under the green movement as well. We are saying, don't throw that out, don't put it in a landfill, it's perfectly usable, we just have to make it better. So it's interesting how the environmental impact of window restoration has made a difference. Even taking into account that we have to deal with lead paint, still we realize a huge amount of green benefits by saving the existing windows that are there. Cost is another thing. People, when you say that you're sort of preservation, they think that it must be really expensive to preserve a window, and yet I cannot tell you how many times I have gone and looked at something and, you know, tallied up what it needs, and they're like, oh, that's less than a Pella window. How could that be? It's all labor. We have a lot of labor. We have really good people that I pay a lot of money to. How can we be less expensive than a Pella window? But it's a good news thing for you because you obviously have some cost advantages sometimes. And again, we do very simple repairs, a broken rope, a broken pane of glass, all those kind of things that drive you crazy probably, and for us it's like an hour of work. Done. You know, how many, we always have people say to us, I've suffered with this for like 5 years, why didn't I call you sooner? 5 years, $85, we're done. So cost is definitely something, when they are, for us, cost goes up depending on the number of panes of glass in a window. This is a 2/2 window, a little heavy demo window. Maybe I shouldn't have put that there. That's a 6 light, and of course if it were like these, it would be called a 6/6. The fewer panes, the less expensive it is. The more panes, the more expensive it is, because for us it's all the corners that we have to clean and sand and get all the gunk out of. So cost people always ask me how much something costs. I'm like, it depends on how many panes of glass, and it really also kind of depends on how large it is. Most house windows are kind of this size. They're 30-something by 50-something. We're right now working on some windows in a school that was converted to offices, and they are 48 inches wide by 96 inches tall. It takes us a lot longer to do those windows, and I don't know why. It's just physically moving them around is so difficult that we end up losing a lot of time on those. But anyway, and the other thing that always gets me on window repair is people think that their house is energy inefficient because of the windows, and yet study after study has said the heat loss through your windows and doors is small. The heat loss through your attic, through your sills, through your foundation is so much more. So windows are not the bad guys. So before doing anything, I thought I would come up with what I consider like the top 5 things to do to make your windows better. The number one way to improve your windows is getting them to close and lock. And I love bringing this sample because it has a lock, but the lock is broken. So it's not really doing any good. People think the lock is a security thing. It's actually part of the weather stripping system. It's designed to pull the 2 sash together and push it all the way up and all the way down. Getting them to do that is sometimes very difficult. One of the things that painters do all the time is paint that upper sash closed. The way these windows are designed to work is you circulate air around them. The upper sash brings down, the lower sash comes in. When we restore windows, or just even do repairs, but this one hasn't been restored, all we do is clean it up and put ropes in it. Being able to open the top only, if you have little kids, this is great. Your kids aren't going to go falling out the window. You can have air coming in. We also have this, like now with the school that's an office, they love being able to open the top windows because you can get fresh air without all the paper blowing off your desk. So, you know, when painters think they're going to save you by caulking the crap out of it and painting it shut, they didn't do you any favors whatsoever. And the other thing is, when you paint the upper shut, you can't paint here. And I can't tell you how many I open. I'd probably be open these. It would be all cruddy and ucky there. So having these 2 sash movable, the way they were designed to be movable, makes a huge difference. But you do need to get it closed all the way. So certainly getting the upper to move can usually make a big difference in getting it to close properly. These have sash cords in them. And if I could only do this on every window, but it's great having access to them. Usually there's all the trim and everything here, so we have to fish it out a different way. But people don't realize that there are upper and lower cords. So if the top one is kind of like that, then you're getting air through here. But it's probably because the upper cords are broken. Again, it takes us about an hour to fix that. So certainly the cords, a lot of times we get paint buildup down here, and in fact that's why this one isn't closing all the way, it's the ditch front on it. We get paint buildup all over the place, so they end up not fitting well. There's a type of weather strip that goes, well actually it has metal pieces that go all the way around, and there's a piece in the middle that gets every piece of dirt and mankind into it, and then the windows don't close correctly. So cleaning that out can make a huge difference in how the windows fit. And then weather stripping is another thing that your windows may or may not have. This one, and you can take a look at it afterwards, we put what's called spring bronze weather strip. And this is a piece of it. Very pretty. But it gets nailed in along the side of the window. So when the window's closed, you don't see it. But it actually acts like a flange, sort of cozy the window. And it is an amazing thermal break because it's metal. Somehow it just makes it so the cold kind of stops around the edges. So it has many functions. It snugs up the windows. The windows slide much easier on metal than wood on wood. And it adjusts with the season because as the windows expand and contract with the seasons, you don't want your weather stripping to bind them up. So pretty much you really only care about weather stripping in the winter. You don't want the wind blowing. On big, heavy windows, we often replace the cord with chain. It's a little bit safer. It's kind of pretty good. But number one way to improve it, get your window to close and lock. The second thing that we always look at is the putty on the outside of the window. This one has a pretty good putty. There's a couple spots. Here it's starting to get flaky. Not too majorly bad. On this window, which is actually from 1850, as you can see, there's hardly any putty left here on this window. The putty is designed to do two things. One is to seal the glass to the wood. The second is to shed water off of it. So once that putty is gone, the water sits there, starts to rot, starts going downhill fast. So keeping the putty intact is very important to keeping the window energy efficient. When we do what we call a tune-up, we always refer to it as a chip and glaze, because we go around and we take off whatever is loose and flaky on the putty. If we try to get it all out, we can break the glass. And a lot of times, that's a really pretty piece of antique glass. We don't want to break the glass. So we usually just chip and glaze as much as we possibly can. But the goal is to get it so it's all nice and intact. And again, the water can run off of it nicely. The other important thing is keeping the paint on the exterior surface in good condition. This paint will help to shed the water away from it and protects the wood. So painting is actually part of our process. The third thing is figuring out why windows rattle. How many people have rattly windows? Yeah. A couple of reasons why they rattle. And probably the one that we see more than anything else ever is this little piece of wood. It's called the parting bead. It literally is this piece that's 3/8 by 3/4 of an inch of wood. It fits in a groove. All it's supposed to do is keep the upper sash away from the lower sash. That's all it does. However, because it's 3/4 by 3/8 of an inch, it tends to warp. It comes out at the bottom, it gets broken, it gets lost, and then all of a sudden this window is really rattling. Not too bad, but popping those parting beads back in, nailing them, you have to again to stay where they're supposed to, can make a huge difference. Because once that starts going, the sash will slide back, you can't get it to lock, yada yada. Dumbest piece of wood ever, but honest to God, it's so important. The other thing is that half the time these front stops aren't put on correctly. The way it's supposed to be on is so that it's right up next to the wood of the window, and that it stays parallel as the window's open. I've seen so many of them where they got put back on. It's a ½ an inch away from the bottom. So the window's just sitting there rattling every single time the wind blows. So it's really simple stuff. Again, the weather stripping helps to keep it in place. If you have the metal weather strip that goes all the way around, a lot of times people, when they're fixing the ropes, just rip it out because it's the most frustrating thing to put in. So they rip it out and throw it out, and then the windows really rattle. So all those kind of things add up to making it stop rattling. But the number one, and I swear, you'll go home now and look at them, but if you have these stupid little pieces and they're out and they're like back there or missing, that's why it's rattling. So you can often find that at a lumber yard. Sometimes even Home Depot has it. It's called parting bead, or sometimes they call it lattice stock. But anything that's 3/8 by 3/4 that will fit in that groove is what you need. Some windows, it's skinnier. Some newer ones, it's a little fatter. But in New England, it's almost all the time 3/8 by 3/4 of an inch. Storm windows. I am a huge fan of storm windows. I understand that people have feelings about storm windows, usually hatred of storm windows. Little tabs, get your fingers stuck, it comes crashing down, it looks ugly, all those things. I agree. However, new triple track storm windows, which is what it's called when you have glass, and screen, it's all in one thing. 90% of what you see, these have triple tracks on them.